Hello, everybody. Hi, Carlton. Hi, Jason.
Hey,
Hello, Laura. How are you doing today?
Good. I think we're all doing great. It's a Friday and it's right before a long weekend. And what a better time to talk about the solution lifecycle.
Yeah, why not? It's Friday. We're hanging out, cruising into the
Exactly.
weekend. Let's talk about the solution life cycle.
Exactly. All right. Well, it's supposed to be the product management minute. So let's see if we can
Mhm.
get it even more concise than we've done in the past.
All right.
Yeah. So I just like to tee this up because not everyone watches every recording, but I'm going to be super
Mhm.
fast. The product management function, that career, that department, I think lives an incredibly complicated life. And that's why we built the Profitable Software Academy. And that's why Carlton and Jason have been working on creating some really amazing content to support that role. And when you're collaborating with all of these different parts of an organization in order to create a profitable software solution, there's a lot of complexity to that. So I love this product management minute because people like Carlton and Jason get to talk about things that sometimes feel really hard and find a way to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more impactful for the organization and for the product management folks who have to do this kind of work. So the PSA is where you spend a lot of your time. I know you both build content and work with students. And so I think part of what makes these topics interesting is you can bring some insights from the companies that you're working with and the students you're working with around where the benefits are, what might be hard, and what are some of the tips to be more effective. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to both of you to talk about the topic at hand. And of course, if anyone has any questions, I'll be looking at both chat and the Q&A. So feel free to interject them and we'll make sure we have time to answer some questions as well.
All right.
All right. The solution lifecycle, take it away.
All right, Laura, let's go to the next slide. This picture here has a summary of the solution life cycle. In previous session, I think people were talking about industry life cycle. And so what we see here is on the left, you see the new solution development, right? Then you have launch, and then you have the classic S-shaped adoption curve. And unlike kind of the industry life cycle, which talks about the creation and the growth, the maturation decline of a collection of companies in a big market, right? The solution life cycle talks about the development, the launch, the growth, maturation, decline of one solution within an entire market, right? And there's a couple things when you just see this diagram that we want to share with you. And I like this diagram because when someone first showed it to me, I was like, oh, now I have a way to understand how the solution evolves and grows over time. And what I like about this diagram is two things to note. One, you go from left to right, right? There's no way, you can't go back and redevelop new solution development, right? And as you progress through these different categories of adopters, right? You can't go back to your innovators, right? Your product's growing, it's creating growth and traction in the market. And so as you move through innovators, you go to the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. That's one thing. So you go from left to right. The other thing I want to add here is that each of these categories here have some durable traits that you can leverage as a product manager, right? And a couple notes here that you see, right? They're organized in a normal distribution. So innovators and laggards are typically going to be a little bit smaller, and the bigger chunk are going to be those early majority and late majority. Jason, what do you want to add?
I think the key here is that we think about these customers at the different stages in different ways. So there is a segment of people who are innovators who self-identify and really are happy to really try anything, particularly when you have relationships with them. So you actually should think about, as a product manager, who in your network would you characterize as innovators, that they're always thinking about and talking about the new thing, because they are the people that can help you network to other innovators. So when you think about the launch, in fact, we're going through this right now with our own launch of the Horizon platform. We do notice that there's these innovators that know us, they like us from the past, they trust us, and they're willing to help us get started. And more importantly, they're providing us feedback to help us improve the product as we then pursue the early adopters. So we really want to be critical and as objective as possible about where are we on this life cycle to identify our opportunities. What would it take for us to transition from early adopter into the early majority? What is the set of features and benefits that we can offer to improve the solution to get us to the next stage and the next stage beyond that.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Laura, you first.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would add that it's interesting to also note that, we're small, but we do have more than one solution that we've been working on over the course of 15 years that the company has been around. So who is right now kind of rising up as, hey, I'm an innovator here. I really want to work with you on Horizon and this early platform, may not have been innovators in another category of solution that we may have been working with or intersecting with in the past. Right. So depending on the problem you're solving, a company may deliver innovators to you, or they may not, depending on what it is that you're like. They're not always the same. They don't stay the same, right? Sometimes, your product is appealing to somebody who's identifying as an innovator, but in another category, they may not be.
Well, right. And I mean, I think of some solutions that we have right now where probably more like late majority and laggards, that the consumers of those solutions that we're providing to the market, the people there are more, they have the traits that are associated with perhaps late majority and laggards. And that's okay, right? Because in a healthy portfolio, right, a product manager is going to have different solutions at different parts of the solution lifecycle. And you just have to be aware of that as a product manager. Like, hey, this solution, we're talking about late majority or early majority. This solution here that's newer, it's more focused on innovators and early adopters. And maybe product managers need different skill sets to be able to interact with these types of consumers as well. So someone who might be really good at dealing with innovators may not be the best product manager to interact with someone in the late majority potentially. All right, let's go to the next slide.
All right.
So I wanted to kind of share with you a little bit more about who these people are, and I wanted to use a little bit of imagery because we throw around these terms, innovators, early adopters, etc. Like, what do we really mean when we talk about these people? So the innovators, I think Jason mentioned, first to adopt, open-minded, independent, curious, free thinkers. They are looking for technology or software-enabled solutions to give them a competitive advantage. And they, because they're innovators, they're networked, and they want to help you as a product manager work with your solution to make it better, right? One of the things also is interesting about an innovator is they have a lot of tolerance for risk. So it doesn't have to be just perfect for an innovator, right? Because they're okay with it being a little rough and around the edges. Next, we kind of have the early adopters. They're similar to innovators, right? Open-minded, enjoy technology, looking for competitive advantages, right? But for the early adopters, they're not as risk tolerant as the innovators, right? So they want to see a little bit of data to help justify their choices that, hey, you know what, your solution is going to help me solve my needs. The other thing that's interesting about early adopters is that they are very much networked like innovators, but they're using their network kind of to create community and feel like a part of something bigger. And these kind of psychological traits are really important to keep in mind when you're working with innovators and early adopters, right? They have some distinctness, similarities, but also some distinctness. Jason, you want to add anything about innovators or early adopters before we go to the later ones?
Keep going.
All right. If we think next for our early majority, these are the folks that you need as a product manager to build that sustainable and scalable business model, right? And we have the early majority is that shift from that independent, open-minded, free thinkers to more a pragmatic, risk-averse consumer, right? And these folks want high-quality solutions that solve their most pressing problems. But what they're looking for is practical solutions. They're looking for reliable solutions, and they're looking for solutions that are high quality. We'll talk a little bit later about the chasm because there's a chasm between the early adopters and early majority. But let's just say, hey, there's this transition from early adopters to early majority. Next up, we have the late majority, right? And the late majority are your most skeptical, risk-averse, and price-sensitive consumers. Right? These are what I would say your traditional mass market, right? And when they want a solution, what they're looking for are durable solutions, much like the early majority. They want pragmatic, durable solutions, high quality. But what they're looking for are solutions that come from stable and mature providers. Right. And then finally, we have the laggards. These are the folks that are most resistant to change. They only adopt solutions when required, either when a solution is sunset or maybe there's some sort of regulatory requirement that says, hey, you absolutely have to upgrade your solution. And I like how Laura mentioned earlier that sometimes people might be in one category of a solution, right? They might be early adopters, but in other categories, they're laggards. For me, like with certain home technology, I am like a laggard. I do not adopt a lot of new technology in the house. I wait until it's very proven. I'm kind of somewhat price sensitive, which is interesting because I work in tech. So you want to add anything here, Jason or Laura?
Oh, that was a great overview.
Yeah. Okay.
I do have a question that I'm wondering if you're going to talk about also in the next slide, but it's like, in what way does the category of customer that you're talking to affect your choices around changing pricing and licensing? Like if you have innovators and you're working with them early on and you're testing business models and things like that, are you doing it more frequently, or is, I know we always tell people you should be reviewing pricing and packaging at least on an annual basis, but is there depending on who you're working with, how does that impact your packaging and pricing review and that cadence in that cycle?
I think to drive adoption, you create special limited offers through policies and fences for different demographics based on how you segment the market in the early stages. So you may see more opportunities to attract early adopters through special offers, and much less so when you get to the early majority. By the time you hit the early majority, you want to be more stable and much more clear with your pricing and packaging so that the early majority segments can self-identify which offering they should select. So let me say it another way. I do not want to underprice my solution so that an enterprise customer pays less than what they would be willing to pay for the same solution offered to a small business who's going to pay much less. And it's a big mistake a lot of companies make. They try to find a homogeneous price level that does not actually give them the maximum profitability across these very different segments who have very different needs and are willing to pay very different price levels for the solution. So the mentality of reaching those different people in those different segments as we regress through the solution lifecycle does change, particularly when you have a more mature solution. Start hitting the late majority as you add more features. Two options. One is I can think about elevating my price because now I'm offering even more value, or should I offer that new feature, that new capability as a profit engine? This is an additional expense that's part of the solution, but it's optional. It's going to drive additional profitability as a profit engine.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jason, because if we go to the next slide, Laura, we talk about that in like 4 tips, right? Which is maybe time the major releases of your solution to coincide with some of these transitions, right? And so we have these transition points, and in these transition points, we may rethink about the pricing and packaging, right? A couple point tips here that I wanted to just emphasize here. The first one's really obvious. Know where you are in the cycle, but it's not a precise thing where you count up the number of customers. So you have this normal distribution, right? You can't just count people, you can't count it, right? But you have to have a general sense of, hey, are we dealing with mostly innovators? Are we dealing with early adopters, early majority, late majority, or laggards, right? And the way that you know this is kind of as a product manager is talk to customers, right? That's the key thing. Number 2, position and package your solution the way that appeals to the targeted category of adopters. So for instance, I think I mentioned earlier that our innovators like rough and incomplete solutions. And the reason, you might ask, well, why would someone want this, right? Because they want to make it better. That's part of the profile of an innovator. They want to be a part of helping you grow that solution and make it better. You bring a rough and incomplete solution to the late majority or a laggard, they're not going to like that at all, right? And so you've got to think about the way that you position, you package it, how you do the pricing, right? If you think about the late majority, they're the most price sensitive. They want really easy to understand pricing. Early adopters, they might be more flexible, right? So you got to think about these durable traits associated with these categories. And then the last thing I want to say here is the chasm, right? And the chasm is that gap between the early adopters and the early majority. And the term was first coined by Jeffrey Moore. He wrote a very famous book called Crossing the Chasm. And I've heard someone describe the chasm as the place where good products go to die, right? And it is the idea that transition between your early adopters and the early majority was most dangerous for a product, because you've got to figure out how to position and package the solution and price it in such a way that it appeals to a sustainable market. And what appeals to your innovators and early adopters isn't necessarily what's going to appeal to the early majority. And this is why products and products don't exit the chasm, because people can't make that transition fast enough. And Laura, when she was reviewing this, reminded me, it's like, don't forget about the power of intangible benefits. And intangible benefits are those benefits that you can offer related to brand, aesthetics, security, and even fun factor if it's relevant to your solution. So when you're thinking about trying to cross the chasm, yes, absolutely emphasize tangible benefits. That's what the early majority wants, but they want other things as well, the intangible benefits.
Jason, one of the things that I was thinking about around the intangible benefits is, we were talking about the profile of the innovator. One of the intangible benefits is to be able to guide the evolution of a new product, right? To be part of the team that's building something brand new, and that excitement you get is the intangible benefit for some people who want to join you early on in the development of a product.
Right.
There's a counter intangible benefit to that. And if you don't capture that as a product manager when you're talking to the early majority, if you still sound like you're talking to people who get really excited about leading and guiding, that could contribute to difficulties crossing the chasm. And I'm just wondering if there are any other coins like that, Jason, that you can think of, where what really works for innovators is what you need to really adjust in your messaging when you're talking to the early majority. I mean, security might be another one, actually, as I say it. Right?
So
risk.
I think that the ease of use, the ease of onboarding is dramatically different once you hit the early majority. I think that's one of the keys, is that it is infinitely easier for the solution to be adopted by the early and late majority than ever is with the innovators or visionaries and the early adopters. That they're more willing to put up with a little bit of friction than you will with the early and late majority. So I think that chasm can be avoided in lots of ways. One is by making the experience as seamless as possible for somebody to begin using the solution. I will add, I actually believe in counting the numbers. I actually do think that the awareness of knowing where you are actually is a number. I think that there's definitely knowing the number of customers you have and the total addressable market and the total addressable market that you can actually serve based on the size of your sales and channel sales partners, whatever those may be. And I think we often discount those a bit, saying, well, I only have so many direct sales. I'm going to sell through the web. I'm going to sell through referrals, but there's also channels. And when we think about that bigger scope of who we can actually reach, now we have numbers, and we can roughly go with somewhere between 9 and 10% are the innovators, roughly 10 to 15% early adopters, maybe 15, 20% on the early majority, to get a sense of, well, where am I? I've got a total addressable market of 500,000 and I'm right around 100,000 customers right now. Now I know where I am in the life cycle. And of course, those numbers change, but we want to be aware of it. That's all part of this. Knowing the market is essential for the product manager, whether the product manager is coming up with those numbers or working with marketing or even advisors. When I was a software product manager, we partnered with Gartner, and Gartner had tons of data that we would use very carefully to understand who are we actually going to be able to reach. And that then led to, now we can uncover who sales can go engage to really promote the solution.
That's a good insight, Jason. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you for sharing. That, I mean, right. It sounds so simple, right? That's, I think, why I overlooked it. But thank you.
Well, then again, I did write the book and put all this content in the book with Luke, so I've thought a lot about this.
Sure, fair enough.
Well, at least you haven't forgotten everything you've written, right? All right, well, we're about at the end of the time, but we're going to talk about vision next time on September 15th. So look out for an invitation for that. And go to our website. We've got some really great resources, not just about product management, but about how to more generally approach the development of sustainably profitable software. So I think we've got nuggets and we've got some deeper dives into these topics. And if anyone has questions about any of it, we're always available to talk. I keep mentioning that Carlton and Jason and others on our team are part of the development of the Profitable Software Academy. It's this really fantastic education program for building product managers at all levels. So if anyone on the call is interested in talking a little bit more about that, there's how you can reach me. I'd love to hear your questions. Any parting words, Carlton or Jason?
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you.
Excellent. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.